Take a moment right now to slow down. Just breathe. Set aside everything that has been racing through your mind, and gently bring your focus inward toward what you have truly been feeling beneath all the noise. You may have noticed something recently that is hard to put into words. A quiet pressure that rises in your chest without any warning. A sudden thought of a specific person that appears in your mind when you least expect it. A restless, almost electric sensation that moves just below the surface of your everyday life. That feeling does not seem random to you, and it probably does not feel like simple imagination either. Something inside you is already paying attention to emotions and possibilities that your conscious mind has not fully caught up with yet. Stay with me here, because what comes next may explain everything you have been feeling lately. Your deeper awareness works on a level that goes far beyond text messages, conversations, or anything you can physically see. It picks up on subtle shifts, long before they ever become obvious in the outside world. This is exactly why you may already sense that something is changing with this person, before there is any clear evidence of it. That soft pull inside your chest, the one you keep brushing off as wishful thinking, may actually be your inner sense telling you that this connection still holds experiences that have not fully played out yet. This is how meaningful changes almost always begin. Before something important shows up in the external world, a quiet tension starts building on the inside first. It feels like emotional pressure that is difficult to describe completely, and that may be exactly where you are standing right now. Something is shifting. Small openings are beginning to appear, where there was once only silence. New possibilities are forming where solid barriers once stood. Your place in this person's life may not have disappeared the way you once feared. While you have been moving through uncertainty and carrying your own unanswered questions, something has been quietly changing inside them. The protective walls they built around their heart, the ones made from fear, pride, the need for control, and the desire to appear unaffected. Those walls have slowly begun to soften. The strong feeling you have been sensing lately may come from a simple truth. Emotions can only stay hidden for so long. Eventually the truth finds its way to the surface, whether a person is ready for it or not. And right now something inside them is getting ready. The connection you share feels deeper than ordinary logic can explain. It does not seem like something that time or distance alone can simply erase. To understand why this shift feels so significant now, and why the days ahead may feel different, it helps to look at what this person has likely been experiencing during the quiet period between you. They may have been moving carefully, keeping their distance while still watching from afar. They could have been caught between the discomfort of their fears and a powerful pull toward you that they worked hard to suppress. Do not scroll past this part, because what comes next explains the exact emotional pattern that has been playing out beneath the surface without you ever realizing it. During the time apart, they may have filled their days with routines and responsibilities that looked perfectly normal from the outside. They may have appeared calm, composed, and completely in control, like someone who had moved on and adjusted easily to a new chapter of life. But that appearance may have been only part of the story. It may have become a role they played, not just for the people around them, but also for themselves, so they could keep believing that stepping back had been the right choice. And as the days kept passing, carrying that role began to feel more and more exhausting. Beneath everything they showed the world, a quiet internal struggle was happening that almost no one around them ever noticed. Night after night, they may have wrestled with emotions they could not easily explain away. They leaned on logic to justify the distance and convince themselves it was the safest and most sensible path. Some of that came from pride, some of it came from fear, some of it came from simply not knowing how to handle feelings that were bigger than they expected. And here is something that not enough people talk about. Sometimes a person steps away not because they feel too little, but because they feel too much. Being truly understood by another person can feel deeply unsettling. It can bring up fears about vulnerability, about losing control, and about the possibility of being hurt in ways that take a long time to heal. But when a connection reaches someone on a real and profound level, No amount of reasoning can hold it back forever. Slowly, the protective barriers begin to soften from the inside. As that happens, they start noticing that life without you feels quieter, in a way that has nothing to do with peace. It feels like something important is missing, something that cannot be replaced by distractions, achievements, or other people, no matter how hard they try. A new awareness begins developing within them. They start recognizing that the guarded version of themselves they have been showing the world is not who they truly are. It is simply a role they adopted for protection, and that role no longer fits the person they are slowly becoming. Every attempt they made to create more space between you kept getting interrupted by something unexpected that pulled their thoughts right back. It was not just ordinary longing. It touched something connected to their identity and sense of purpose. For them, this connection may have become something resembling a personal turning point. There may have been stretches of time when they tried to cover these feelings by staying busy with work, social plans, responsibilities, and constant noise. Yet even in the middle of all that distraction, comparisons kept appearing. Thoughts they never intended to allow kept finding their way back to you. Feelings they tried to place in the past kept standing at the front of their mind, demanding to be acknowledged. All of this has been building quietly beneath the surface, and it has been contributing to the shift you are already beginning to sense. Something is changing, and this time the familiar distractions may not be offering the same escape they once did. A person can avoid their deeper emotions for only so long before the effort becomes genuinely exhausting. That may be exactly where they are right now. The life they constructed to keep those feelings at a comfortable distance may no longer provide the same numbness it once did. They may have convinced themselves that enough space would weaken the connection over time. They may have believed that enough silence would slowly reduce the intensity of what they felt. They may have assumed that enough time would eventually remove you from their emotional landscape entirely. But the opposite happened. The longer the separation continued, the more clearly their feelings came into focus. Rather than fading, you became more present in their thoughts. Rather than disappearing, the connection grew harder to explain away. They started noticing reminders of you in unexpected places, during quiet evenings before falling asleep, in the middle of conversations that felt strangely incomplete, in crowded places where noise surrounded them but they still felt inexplicably alone. Something kept redirecting their attention back toward you. And that is when a deeper understanding began taking root inside them. They started realizing that what they shared with you was not simply an ordinary connection or a temporary feeling. It touched parts of them that very few people ever reach. Once that kind of realization settles in, it changes the way a person sees everything around them. Because once you truly recognize that a bond is meaningful, it becomes impossible to keep treating it as if it never mattered. Their mind may still try to debate the situation. Logic may still present arguments against it. But the heart begins speaking with a persistence that reasoning alone simply cannot silence. There may have been evenings when they sat alone and found themselves remembering conversations you have probably forgotten completely by now. Small moments that once seemed ordinary began carrying unexpected weight in their memory. The way you looked at them during a difficult moment, the comfort your presence created without any effort at all, the rare and quiet feeling of being with someone around whom they did not have to pretend to be anything other than themselves. That kind of emotional safety is genuinely rare, and when it disappears, the absence becomes almost impossible to ignore. It leaves behind a space that cannot be filled by achievements, new experiences, or other people. The memory of being genuinely understood has a way of staying present long after circumstances have changed. As these realizations keep growing stronger inside them, maintaining emotional distance becomes increasingly difficult. The explanations that once felt convincing begin losing their power. Old fears still exist, but they no longer feel stronger than the pull toward understanding what this connection actually means. The change does not happen all at once. Real emotional shifts rarely do. Instead, they unfold gradually through quiet moments of reflection, unexpected honesty, and sudden clarity that arrives without warning. Little by little, the truth becomes harder to look away from. What was once pushed aside begins demanding real attention. The feelings they worked so hard to suppress are now asking to be acknowledged. The questions they kept avoiding are returning with greater urgency than before. The connection they tried to leave in the past is standing directly in front of them again, asking to be understood rather than ignored. And perhaps that is exactly why your instincts have been so active lately. Perhaps that is why certain thoughts arrive unexpectedly and certain emotions feel stronger than usual. Whether or not every feeling points toward a specific outcome, something inside you already senses that a chapter is turning, and you are right to trust that feeling. There are moments in life when change begins long before it becomes visible to anyone on the outside. The emotional world moves ahead of the physical one. What eventually appears on the surface is often the result of quiet internal shifts that have already been happening beneath everything for a very long time. This person may now be reaching a point where honesty feels less frightening than avoidance. They may be discovering that running from their emotions requires far more energy than simply facing them. They may be recognizing that some connections leave a lasting mark precisely because they reveal truths about who a person is beneath all their defenses. As that awareness grows, the path forward begins looking different than it once did. The walls that once seemed permanent may no longer feel impossible to cross. The silence that once felt endless may no longer feel sustainable. The emotions that were buried deep may be preparing to step into the light where they can finally be seen for what they truly are. For now, what matters most is recognizing that real connections leave traces that do not disappear quietly. They continue teaching, revealing, and transforming long after the initial moments have passed. And if this person has genuinely been moving through the emotional journey described here, they may be arriving at a place where clarity is stronger than confusion, where authenticity matters more than self-protection, and where the feelings they once tried to bury can no longer stay hidden beneath the surface. They have been trying to fill that empty space, and it simply has not worked. The more they searched for what they had with you somewhere else, the more clearly they began to understand what truly existed between the two of you. At first, their pride told them they could move forward without much difficulty, that they were stronger than the emotions they were carrying. But pride always meets its limit eventually. It runs directly into the reality of genuine emotional truth. For this person, that moment has arrived. They have started seeing this connection from a completely different angle. It is no longer something they believe they can simply replace or walk away from at will. They are beginning to understand that knowing you changed something deep inside them, in a way that does not reverse itself on command. You cannot just decide to undo that kind of impact. While all of these shifts have been happening inside them, something equally significant has been changing inside you. Even if this person still crosses your mind often, and you still wonder what the future may hold, you are no longer standing in the same emotional place you once were. Something inside you has grown steadier, quieter, more grounded. You have learned what it actually feels like to reach towards someone who is not meeting you halfway. You have lived through the exhaustion of carrying most of the emotional weight on your own, and gradually, through all the uncertainty and silence, you began bringing your energy back to yourself. That shift matters far more than it may look like on the surface. When you stopped stretching beyond your limits, and stopped making yourself endlessly available in the hope that it would eventually be enough, the entire energy between you began to change. There was a time when most of your emotional attention was directed outward toward this person. How you felt each day depended heavily on whether they responded, whether they showed up, or whether they seemed to notice you at all. Your sense of balance was closely tied to their actions and reactions. But eventually you grew tired of living that way. Not in a dramatic or explosive way, simply because your deeper self finally understood that your own peace carries real value, and you began redirecting your focus inward, not because you stopped caring about them, but because you finally started caring for yourself with the same consistency and devotion you had been offering to someone else. That choice created a powerful shift in energy. When someone constantly directs their attention outward, Their presence can start feeling familiar enough that others take it for granted. It becomes background noise rather than something consciously appreciated. But when that energy quietly returns inward and settles into a calm steadiness, the absence of it becomes impossible to ignore. That is exactly what this person is beginning to notice now. They are experiencing your distance differently because your energy no longer carries the same urgency or need for reassurance. You are no longer reaching toward them in the way you once did, and rather than weakening the connection, this change forced them to confront what they have genuinely been missing. This is one reason they have become increasingly restless. Somewhere inside them they sense that you are evolving, the version of you who waited endlessly, tried harder than necessary, and made yourself smaller just to keep the peace. That version is becoming someone new. And that realization creates a feeling of urgency. Suddenly, time no longer feels infinite to them. They are starting to understand that opportunities do not stay available forever. People often fail to recognize the real value of something until they have spent enough time living without it. This person is now sitting with the full weight of every moment they delayed, every feeling they pushed aside, and every choice influenced more by fear than by honesty. For perhaps the first time they cannot easily look away from that truth. Sometimes separation is not what destroys a bond. Sometimes it is exactly what reveals how significant that bond truly is. Distance has a way of exposing emotional patterns that are impossible to ignore when everything is quiet. It reveals where fear has taken up permanent residence inside someone. It also shows where a person may have been slowly losing themselves while searching for connection in all the wrong places. Most importantly, it forces each person to face who they actually are when they are standing completely alone. This time apart has changed both of you, but in very different ways. It helped you come back to your own worth without needing their approval to confirm it. At the same time, it gave them the full experience of moving through daily life without your particular presence, and that experience has left a mark. That is why what you are feeling right now carries so much weight. The things that once stayed hidden beneath avoidance and constant distraction are rising to the surface. This person is beginning to understand that they do not simply miss the attention you offered. They miss your energy. They miss your depth. They miss the specific way they felt when they were around you. They miss being understood without having to over-explain every part of themselves. That realization has become strong enough that it can no longer be easily set aside. What they are experiencing is not just a handful of difficult evenings or a passing mood. It has become something constant, something that moves through their daily life quietly, whether they choose to acknowledge it or not. There are moments when they are doing something completely ordinary, and a memory of you suddenly captures their full attention. A familiar sound, a certain scent, a simple word, even a particular time of day begins carrying reminders of you. At first these moments made them uncomfortable because they wanted to believe they were fully in control of their own inner world. They wanted to decide exactly when you entered their thoughts. But deep emotional truth does not follow those rules. The stronger the bond, the more naturally it finds its way into awareness. It arrives without asking permission. It stays longer than expected. And it keeps returning no matter how many times they try to redirect their focus elsewhere. They are now reaching a point where resisting the connection costs more energy than simply accepting it. The walls they built for protection no longer feel protective. They feel isolating. The silence they once believed was necessary has become heavy. It no longer feels like peace. It feels like something unresolved. And that unresolved silence has pushed them into a level of reflection they have not reached before. From that place they are looking back on the past and seeing it with completely new eyes. They remember moments when you tried to understand them while they kept their guard up. They recall times when you offered patience they never fully appreciated in the moment. Those memories now carry a different meaning entirely, because they can finally see what was truly being offered to them all along. Real connection often feels ordinary while it is present every single day. People do not always recognize how rare something is when it surrounds them consistently. Sometimes its true value only becomes visible after it is gone. This person is beginning to see just how uncommon what you offered truly was. the honesty, the emotional depth, the quiet consistency, the comfort of being with someone around whom they could simply be themselves without having to perform or protect. They have searched for pieces of that feeling in other places and come up empty every single time. Every unsuccessful attempt has only made your significance clearer in their mind. There have been nights when they tried with everything they had to move on completely, only to find their thoughts returning to you before the evening had even ended. There were moments when they attempted to sever the emotional connection entirely, only to feel the pull grow stronger shortly afterward. Every effort to escape the bond seemed to make them more aware of it. Rather than creating real distance, those efforts only highlighted how deeply this connection had already taken root inside them. This happens because what existed between you was never limited to the surface level. Something inside them recognized something genuine inside you, and that kind of recognition does not simply disappear because someone decides it should. The shift in their understanding has changed their energy at its foundation. Whether they have shown any visible signs of it yet or not, they feel the difference. They sense that you are no longer chasing them emotionally the way you once did. They notice that you have become more grounded within yourself, less anxious, less dependent on their responses to maintain your own balance. There is a new steadiness about you that was simply not there before, and ironically, that is exactly what has made their awareness of you stronger than ever. When someone stops forcing love and begins returning fully to themselves, their energy takes on a completely different quality. It becomes calm, centered, quietly powerful, and it draws attention in a way that urgency and need never could. You found peace within yourself, and in that peace they were finally left alone with the full strength of their own unfiltered emotions. Without the distraction of your former urgency to hide behind, they could no longer avoid facing what they truly felt. Now they are standing directly in front of emotions they once believed would eventually disappear on their own. Instead of fading, those feelings have become clearer. Instead of weakening, they have grown more difficult to deny. For the first time in a long while, they are beginning to understand that some connections are not measured by how often two people speak, or how much time passes between them. Some connections leave an imprint that keeps shaping a person long after the silence begins. And that realization is changing everything they thought they knew. Their thoughts keep returning to this connection again and again without their permission. Their emotions are no longer allowing them to stay comfortably distant from the truth. What they feel is becoming impossible to keep denying. You matter to them, not in a casual or passing way, but in a way that has genuinely changed how they experience closeness and emotional connection with anyone. That realization feels unsettling for someone who has spent a long time trying to stay in control. Because once a person fully accepts how much someone means to them, they must also face the reality of being vulnerable. They have to acknowledge the risks that come with opening their heart. Fear has driven many of their choices for a long time. Fear of rejection, fear of losing control, fear of being truly seen and then abandoned anyway. But fear eventually reaches a point where it can no longer carry the same weight. There comes a moment when the burden of avoiding the truth becomes heavier than the discomfort of simply facing it head-on. That is the stage they are unmistakably moving toward now. The silence between you no longer feels empty to them. It has become emotionally loud. Every day they remain disconnected. The awareness inside them grows stronger. Every attempt to suppress what they feel creates more pressure rather than any real relief. This is why the energetic shifts you have been sensing lately feel so intense. Something inside them is genuinely preparing for change, not a forced change or a temporary reaction. A sincere emotional realization that quietly transforms the way a person views their entire life from the inside out. They are beginning to understand that losing you would not simply mean losing another person. It would mean losing a part of themselves that they only discovered through this particular connection. That understanding reaches deeper than they expected. When someone realizes that another person helped them uncover sides of themselves they never knew existed, it leaves a mark that does not fade, whether they have shown any outward signs of it yet or not. Their heart is slowly and steadily moving toward a point where silence can no longer be maintained. The feelings they buried are rising, the truth they avoided is waiting, and the connection they tried to leave behind is not finished with them yet. What happens next may surprise you both.